What's up everybody, NC here, and welcome to my Magicka Templar PVE DPS build for the Homestead patch. Let's get right into it. So looking at the character sheet, when we use a potion, fully buffed, we're sitting at 42.6k max Magicka, 17.1k health, 2800 spell damage, and 65% spell critical. Of course, all of our points are into Magicka. I'm a Dark Elf on this character. Dark Elf will give you the most damage possible, especially in Trials when you have a Magicka DK applying Engulfing Flames. However, High Elf is slightly more sustained if you want to go with a little bit more sustain. And Breton is also not bad, but again, the best race for this is definitely Dark Elf or High Elf. I'm a Vampire for the Magicka Recovery passive. We're using the max health and max Magicka food. The Thief Munda Stone to boost our critical chance. Let's go over the gear. So, starting with our front bar, we're using 2 Moondancer swords. One sharpened Moondancer sword with weapon and spell damage enchant on it, and one precise Moondancer sword. The reason why we're using precise is that the crit that it gives outweighs 2 sharpened swords. With sharpen, you're over penetrating the target a little bit with all the debuffs that come from your tanks in your group. So I do recommend going with 1 sharpened, 1 precise. Make sure you have 1 sharpened at least. If you don't have a precise one, 2 sharpened is just as good damage as well. On our back bar, we're running a Maelstrom Inferno staff. Now if you don't have a Maelstrom sharpened Inferno, you can go a few ways. 1, you can farm either Moondancer, or 2, you can just make a crafted sharpened Inferno staff. It's not a big DPS loss, but make sure you have a sharpened Inferno staff on your back bar. Now of course our front bar swords are going with our jewelry, which is also Moondancer. So that gives you the last proc is when you activate a synergy, you gain a Shadow Blessing that increases your spell damage by 448, or a Lunar Blessing that increases Magicka recovery by 448. Now, a very, very important thing that you have to remember is if you need the Magicka recovery, if you're running low on resources, you'll see a glow under your feet that gives you a lot of Magicka recovery. But if you don't need the recovery, keep hitting synergies until you get the spell damage proc. Now, here's also another very, very important thing. Don't go out of your way to mess up your rotation to look for synergies. Only use it when it's convenient, when it's there, and when you're able to, try to re-synergize to swap out the recovery for the damage. The damage blessing looks like blue glow around your hands. We'll see it very, very clearly in an animation. So again, 2 swords of Moondancer on the front bar, jewelry of Moondancer on the jewelry pieces, and Maelstrom Inferno staff on the back bar. Now, if you don't have Moondancer swords, you can either go with Aether swords and Aether jewelry. That's also really, really good damage. Or if you don't have those either, you can just use Willpower swords with Moondancer or Aether jewelry, or simply craft yourself a set of Torics. However, Moondancer is the most, Aether is second best, Willpower is third best, and then all the others are after that. For our monster set, we're using Grottar, still very, very strong, even though it does not crit. 1 heavy, 1 medium, both divines of course. And for our main 5Ps, Burning Spellweave is still the best in slot, just like last patch. Now, if you don't have Burning Spellweave, the only option that's viable for Templar DPS is Juliano's now. Twiceborn is okay, doesn't do as much damage anymore because they did nerf Warhorns and crit pretty significantly. So use the time. It's worth the time to farm Burning Spellweave. It's really, really strong. It's by far the best in slot set that you can wear for any Magicka classes this patch, unless you're using pets on a sword. So get Burning Spellweave. It's worth it. If you don't have it, don't want to farm it, go for Juliano's. So that's it for the gear. Let's go over the skills. So our front bar looks as follows. The first skill is Inner Light. This gives you 5% max Magicka and also 2% max Magicka and recovery from the Mage's Guild passives. Next is Reflective Light. Now, if you want more single target, and what I've been thinking about is for bosses, if if it's more of a single target oriented content that you're doing, I would go with Vampire's Bane for a couple of reasons. One, it's a stronger single target dot and a stronger single target insta damage than Reflective Light. However, if you're doing trials that require a little bit more AoE and all the boss fights have adds in them, just like most of them, I do like Reflective Light for the extra AoE damage. And the damage loss single target is not that major either. So Reflective Light is the second skill. Third is of course Radiant Oppression. Now it did get a little bit of a nerf this patch, but it's still the best execute in the game. We are now using it instead of 41% or lower, we're using it at 25% or lower, however. So that's the only change that we're doing with this skill. So 25% or lower, keep up Blockade and Reflective and Spam Beam. Next, Purifying Light. This got a really, really nice buff this patch. It does insta damage, and after 6 seconds it explodes with even more damage. Now, there have been a lot of talk. There has been a lot of talk about the skill being bugged and storing not only yours, but the group's damage as well. Now, I'm not sure how true that is. However, I have seen it hit a lot harder in trials. I'm not sure if that's because, obviously, it's going to hit a lot harder in trials because of all the extra buffs and debuffs that you're getting. But I'm not sure if it's really storing everyone else in your group's damage. So I'm not sure about that. However, I am sure that this is a DPS increase and it's worthy of being in your rotation. So make sure you keep that up. And we'll go over the rotation in a second. Next is Puncturing Sweeps. This is our main spammable. It also gives you some really nice passives for your crit. And lastly, Shooting Star. This is our main single target ultimate. If you know it's a stationary single target fight, definitely use this skill. It also gives you 2% max Magicka and magic recovery. On our back bar for the ultimate is Fiery Rage. Now, this skill we use at the beginning of the fights and for big trash pulls. It's a ton of damage. It's gigantic AoE. So any AoE or short bursty fights, make sure you're using this ultimate. Next, we are double barring Inner Light. Again, 5% max Magicka, 2% recovery and Magicka. So you're getting maximum 7% Magicka. It's really, really strong. Next is Blockade of Fire. One of the strongest dots in the game. Has really, really nice area of effect as well. Not only that, but it also constantly procs our Burning Spell Weave. Just like Reflective Light. Just like our Grotto. Next is Rearming Trap. Make sure you keep this up 100% of the time. Gives you Minor Force, which increases your crit damage by 10%. So it's a really, really nice damage buff. Next is Harness Magicka. Now, I know there are a lot of PVE heroes out there that don't think they need their shield. Trust me, you need shields. You never know when it might come in handy. Even if you know the fights really, really well, there are some things that we just can't be prepared for. Maybe some crazy damage burst will come at you at no time, or somebody dies and you have to shield. So just keep shields on your bar just in case, even if you don't need it. If you don't need it, great, don't use it, don't sacrifice your damage. The only thing that I would swap this out for is Ritual Retribution, and I do that in AoE fights. So when I need a little bit more AoE damage or maybe some extra heals, you can swap that out for Harness Magic, but usually the shield is on my bar. And lastly is Blazing Spear. Now, it no longer stuns enemies, as you know, this patch, but they also changed the duration of the skill from 6 seconds to 8 seconds, so it fits really, really nicely in our rotation. It still does great damage, so it's worth keeping up even in single target fights now because of that 8-second duration. So it's really, really strong, got a nice buff. Keep it up, and of course it procs Burning Light. So keep this up in your rotation. So that's it for the skills. Now let's go over the CP. The green tree is always very, very easy for Magicka characters. 100 Magician, 100 Arcanist, because you do want the maximum sustain possible. Next, we have 97 in Elemental Expert, 27 in Elfborn, 1 into Staff Expert in the blue tree, and lastly we have 75 points into Thaumaturge. Most of the Templar skills, abilities are channels, so they do get buffed by Thaumaturge. Not only that, but you want to make sure that you have the Exploiter passive, because whenever the enemies are off balanced, there are a lot of factors that cause off balancing on enemies, concussing on enemies. So this will be up almost 100% of the time as long as both of your healers are running lightning staff, or one of your damage dealers runs a lightning staff. Whatever it is, make sure you have a lightning blockade in your group, and lightning blockade is kept up so you can take full advantage of this exploiter passive. As you know, the red tree is always changing, and it always depends on what content you're running. I was running Hellra, so this is how I had my CP set up. But if you're running, for example, hard mode AA or hard mode VMAL, you would take some points out of Hardy and put them into Spell Shield. Or if you're a runner, you'd take them out and put them into Quick Recovery and Spell Shield. So it's really always, it's always varying. The red tree is always up to you. It always varies on what content you're doing, so keep that in mind. It's never static. So lastly, let's go over the rotation for the build. Now, of course, I don't have Ellie Drain, so I'm going to put on Ellie Drain because I'm not going to be able to sustain that well by myself. So I'm just going to put on Ellie Drain, but remember in the slot, we always have our Inner Light. So don't put Ellie Drain for yourself in trials especially. Healers should have that. So here's the rotation. We're just going to apply Ellie Drain just for the funds. And we're going to start every single fight the same. Now this would be on your back bar. You would proc Inner Light, fully charged heavy, and start with 1 spear, blockade, rearming trap, reflective light, purifying light, 2 sweeps. Now as I switch bars here, I'm going to throw another reflective light and then swap, and this time we're going to skip trap. So we would do blazing spear, blockade, reflective light, purifying light, and 2 sweeps one more time. Throw reflective light and then restart the rotation. So blazing spear, blockade, trap, reflective light, purifying light, sweeps, and so on and so forth. As far as ultimates go, here's how it would work. If you have Fiery Rage on your back bar ready to go at the beginning of the fight, you would start like this. Inner Light, fully charged heavy, into Fiery Rage, and then you start your rotation. Blazing Spear, Blockade, Trap, Reflective Light, Purifying Light, 2 sweeps, bar swap with Reflective Light. This time we skip trap, and 2 sets of sweeps. Now if it's a single target fight, once you've used Fiery Rage one time, you're going to drop meteors on cooldown. Don't save up for Fiery Rage, as meteors will do more damage over a long period of time, especially in a single target fight. Now if you know there are going to be lots of adds where you have to have a lot of AoE damage, you can save up for Fiery Rage. But again, if it's a single target long fight, I do suggest saving up for meteors and dropping them on cooldown. So just to show you the single target rotation full speed, here's how it would look. Now Blazing Spear goes away, Blockade goes away, we recast those. And now that was our second, so we have to reapply Trap. As soon as meteor is up, make sure you drop it. And notice how I'm casting Reflective Light right before the bar swap. It takes no time at all. Now, here's the thing that most people are not fully sure of. When is it a good time to start beaming? When is it a DPS increase to start beaming? Because it's very, very important that you start doing that at the right time. Otherwise, you are going to lose damage instead of gain damage. Now, again, keeping in mind the fact that it took a little bit of a nerf this patch. Before we used it at about 41 to 39%. We would keep up our dots at 39%. And then instead of 2 sweeps, we do 2 beams. This patch, since it got a little bit of a nerf, we would only start beaming at 25%. And at that point, the rotation would be like this. It would be trap, blockade, reflective light, to make sure that our burning spell weave is always proccing. Then we do light attack, beam, and another beam. Then we do blockade, reflective light, 2 beams, and the 3rd beam. Now, if you want to keep up your blockade, which I do recommend, blockade, track, reflective light, always do 2 beams. 1 beam and 2 beam. Blockade, reflective, because we casted rearming trap, it's still up. Now this is the 2nd rotation, so we recast trap and beam. So that's pretty much it for the single target rotation. Again, we keep up our regular rotation all the way up until 25%. At 25%, you want to just keep up blockade, rearming trap, reflective light, and instead of sweeps, we're doing beams. That's pretty much it for the single target rotation. For the AoE rotation, it's going to change up slightly. So for AoE, what I do is I take off harness, I put on ritual retribution, and basically we don't even have to swap bars for any AoE situations. The AoE fights would look like this. You kind of get in the middle to start. Make sure you put down your blockade, put down your trap, put your ritual retribution down, and then we do 5 blazing spears, and we do blockade, ritual, and spam spear. You can do 5 to 6 spears. Just make sure that you're keeping up your blockade, trap, ritual, and spamming spears. And of course, in AoE fights, we're using the Fiery Rage to keep up our damage. So that's pretty much it for the build, guys. Again, not too much has changed since last patch in the Homestead patch for the Magicka Templars. They're still a really, really strong class. It's still worth having at least 1, maybe 2 in the group. Really depends on what content you're running. But with this rotation, with this build, you're still going to put out really, really nice DPS. Good Templars can put out almost as much DPS as Sorks and Magicka DKs. They have very good AoE. They have really good class utility. So practice the rotation, farm the gear. You're really going to like this build. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did and helped you out, make sure you hit the like, subscribe button, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.